Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be working on Panzer, my 2005 E55 AMG, and specifically we're going to be working on the supercharger cooling system. Now this is going to go above and beyond our standard IC pump, double stacking exchangers, improving lines, and adding a reservoir while splitting the cooling. This is going to go beyond that, and I'm pretty excited. This is specifically thanks to DTK Motorsports, who made this kit for me and many others that are already using it currently. Now, this one took me a little longer to put together because I wanted to do it right, and I wanted to be the cherry on top of my refined product, which is my AMG, and I am really, really excited. Now, this is going to go, like I said before, above and beyond the standard cooling, and this is going to modify and completely change the lower cooler below the supercharger, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. Now, as we all know, I've already made a lot of changes onto this E55 as far as its cooling, but there's one thing that I've never really messed with or modified, and that's this supercharger cooler that's literally in between the valley underneath the supercharger. Now, I don't know why they designed it this way, but I just know that this is the Achilles heel to this setup. Everything is relatively strong at this point from what I've done, from a bigger a reservoir tank, splitting it from the actual coolant for the engine, or the coolant reservoir for the engine, and of course upgrading to a very strong pump setup with 3/4 inch lines and stacking exchangers. Now, the only benefit you're really going to get for this when you're using this stock cooler that's underneath this charger is way better recovery, and it's going to decrease or pretty much slow down your IAT temp increases. It's never really going to improve it if you do a setup like this, as far as keeping it consistent, but it will slow it down, giving you a longer pass, a more powerful pass, and then of course a quick recovery right after. Other than that, for the most part, it being under there is pretty much the stopping point of this setup. And this is what we're going to modify and change. We're going to completely eliminate that center cooler, and we're going to add top mounts. Now, the way how this factory setup works, it's relatively very simple. I've gone over it a few times, and those that are already familiar with this setup already know, but for those that don't, it's relatively simple. From the original manufacturer, they shared the reservoir coolant for the engine with the supercharger, and pretty much they had your standard lines that would go through to the radiator. There was an actual T that would link both the coolant for this line setup with your engine, pretty much just giving that fluid that it needs to circulate. The supercharger itself would take in that fluid, pass it through the cooler, cool down the air running through the charger, coming right out into a factory lower exchanger, which I obviously don't have. It would come right out into a small Bosch pump that would focus through and send it right back. There was no really separate reservoir for this system other than this expansion tank, which would share the fluid. Now, that setup was adequate for, a standard daily driver, for someone that does one good pull and then they're done, and then letting that system cool down. Every now and then, people who own these cars now, they want more than that. So that's what I did. I split the cooling in general. Before, I had a small little reservoir tank that I purchased from someone who fabbed one up, named Eric Mills. He made a little reservoir tank, and it mounted perfectly right here. That was great and all, but I wanted more fluid capacity, which obviously I went with the tank itself. Now, with the actual setup that I've added a upper and lower exchanger. And there's many options. You can do either a one large exchanger or a dual setup. I prefer the dual setup because I kind of retain some of the factory points, like this right here, this hood latch, and some other attributes. And I think this looks really pleasing, and it's easier to work on and to take apart, versus having one large cooler in the back. Now, from, like I mentioned before, there's my reservoir tank. It comes straight down through that hose. It goes right into this elbow, this high flow elbow, into this Japsco pump. Now, again, this is an aftermarket option, and I fabricated my own bracket. But this pump is a 21 GPM pump and is designed to go against head pressure, which I definitely have the stack exchangers and, of course, the coolers that are going to be mounted up top. So this is adequate enough. Plus, it's an industrial sized pump So it's a steel casing, steel frame, steel peller. It's pretty much designed for longevity, and that's pretty much what I'm going to be testing out. So far, so good. It's going to shoot out the pump. The cool fluid's going to run in through the stock cooler under the supercharger. Now, as that cold fluid is going into that cooler underneath the supercharger, air is passing through, which is cooling down the air that's going into the engine. Once it passes through, it goes to the cooler. There's an IET sensor in the back. That's feed. That air passes through that sensor, spreads through these surge tanks, and the air gets forced into the actual engine. Hot fluid comes out into the first exchanger. Dual passes through. Dual passes the second exchanger back into the reservoir. Very, very simple system. Now, you could do kill the chiller. You could do a lot of options. I stayed with this option because, again, I don't want to mess with my AC system, and all this is simple and easy to use and do yourself. And like I mentioned before, this is the Achilles heel of the setup. If you have a proper pump, a proper cooling lines, a good reservoir tank, and an effective cooling system, everything ran accordingly, no sharp bends, and everything ran smooth and proper, you'll have a very, very effective recovery rate and a very, very effective IET heat temp reduction. To kind of summarize it, like I said before, your heat increases as you're running through the pass, but with this kind of setup, it reduces how fast it climbs. The other setup before, it would stay consistent, and then it'll start to spike relatively quick, heat soaking you really, really effectively, and reducing your next attempt to race whoever it is that you're racing, or picking on whoever you're picking on in general. Now, with my setup, my temperature climb is slowed dramatically. Still goes, but as soon as I let off the throttle, recovery is instant, almost instant, thanks to the Japsco pump and how I have everything effectively ran. This is perfect enough for a daily driver who does multiple pulls and has a good recovery rate on top of that. But I'm trying to get more of I'm trying to improve the setup while changing the style altogether. So let's go back outside. I hope this kind of explains the concept here. And here it is. Here is my top mount cooling setup from DTK, or by TTK, which will be replacing that lower cooler. And to give you an idea what this lower cooler looks like, here it is. This is the modified lower cooler. Pretty much it's hollowed out and gutted out completely. So you have no inlet and outlet ports. As you can tell, the inlet and outlet ports are sealed. Everything's welded shut. The IET sensor that was positioned here is welded closed. And pretty much you have your hollowed core that's going to take place and replace the one that I have currently altogether. Now, these right here are the new coolers that will take its place. And yes, they are dual coolers. These coolers right here pretty much represent almost, I would like to say close to 3 times the capacity, but that's not the case. It's about a little shy under. One of these coolers is slightly bigger than the stock cooler that's under here. And you can pretty much see the difference. And as far as depth goes, these coolers are deeper. So that they do have, it's almost close to 3 times the cooling capacity as far as the charged air that goes through from the stock cooler itself, which is right there. It's going to be replaced with 2 top mounts. Now, I know this looks a little crazy and a little wild, which I'm all for. Let me explain to you how this works. It's a little bit different as far as the change goes. So obviously you're going to have your supercharger is going to push the air normally, and through this modified cooler here, it's going to go to these Ys here. These outlets will be pushed behind the piping. Will go all the way around into both sides to the new coolers, come out the back into these modified surge tanks. As you can see, the direction is completely changed. And up here you have an IET sensor port where the new IET sensor is repositioned. The cooler air is pushed into the engine, and that's pretty much it. It's a relatively simple layout.
Now you can see the inside of these coolers, and right below that you're going to see, if I can lift it up just slightly, the outlet and inlet ports for the actual water to go through. You got your inlet and outlet ports on the bottom of each cooler. If you're wondering what these are your little breather ports up top, one on each side. Obviously these will be capped off. And your inlets and outlets. You got one inlet on each side and one outlet on each side. Henceforth why I have the Y set up, because one of these is going to be for the outlet for where the pump's pushing towards the coolers, and the discharge into one where it's coming out the coolers. And again, this is all going to be using 3/4 inch lines throughout the entire system, and with proper diameter outlets and inlets for these 12N fittings all the way through.
Nothing too complex or far-fetched. I did a little bit go above and beyond, and I went for some more upgrades. Pretty much a bigger snout for my bigger throttle body. And of course, like I said, I wanted to do this right, and I went with, you know, AN fittings to go with the hosing with titanium sheathing, fiberglass sleeves. So everything's going to be, it's going to look relatively fresh, relatively clean. It's going to be wunderbar. It's going to be wonderful for the most part. And that's obviously my new belt wrap kit, brace bar. Got that modified there as well. So that's going to be a nice touch to this overall complete system. And of course, you know, a new belt to go with it to kind of clean everything off. So if you're wondering why I have that HKS filter, now you know, because these are going to take place of the air boxes. The air boxes are already done. Sold them off to a new buyer, or new owner, so to speak. And my HKS filters, I bought two filter elements. I bought the dry green and the wet red. Pretty much, it's going to complement the green belt when I'm running the green filter, or it's going to complement the slight little accentings of red aluminum with the red filter. So there's going to be some correlations to that. So it's going to be relatively good. It's going to blend in really well. I did want to go with a yellow filter element, but they're discontinued, or they're not in stock. Hopefully one day they do add it. I did send an email. Not that sure that will work, but now you guys get the general idea. I am looking forward to this all together. So here's some more, I guess you can say, glamour shots of this setup. Now I had this, DTK offers a powder coating service, but I wanted my powder coater here to do it for me. So he sent pretty much everything raw, nothing pretty much in any kind of finish or any kind of color. And I had Sand City powder coat these a yellow. Now, not just any yellow. The previous Surge tanks are a very bright yellow. And I honestly didn't think, well, honestly, he honestly didn't think, my powder coater, that this would go well with the car. It kind of stuck out to him the wrong way. And you know what? He was right. And I didn't think he can get close enough to the color of my car, which is solar beam yellow, but he did. This is almost close to my solar beam paint. It does have metallic hue and a little bit of pearl accenting. So it does match the paint really well. It's a little bit more of a darker contrast to the actual Surge tanks that I have in there right now. The tank itself is already this color, so you got a general concept a little bit before I came back in here. And you can see here, over here as well, I got the snout done the same way. So everything's going to blend in with the black and yellow themes consistent throughout the vehicle with a closer shade to my paint. And of course, a jet black with a high gloss coating. Very durable, powder coated, so it's really good. And he also included these for me, which is awesome because, you know, I get to represent the makers of this cooling kit. Now, I am going to go through a refresher as well. I'm going to just sneak peek right under here. I do have some Arnott parts down here, and it's typically a brand new air compressor, which is a new Wabco pump. No different, it's just branded Arnott. It still has the it's pretty much a direct replacement from the one that I have underneath. And then, of course, since the Bilstein are discontinued from the rears, I went ahead and got new air springs for the rear for the air suspension. And this is going to be really pretty good as far as like a nice refresher. And obviously there is my new throttle body down over there for the snout. Now, nothing can be done right without the tidbits. And let me show you. Let me get a better position, honestly. So here are my tidbits. This is pretty much the proper throttle body harness for the new throttle body that I got. All the gaskets and seals, the coupler itself for the bypass, the supercharger, the surge tank inlets, the mating surfaces for the heads to the supercharger, the casings for the supercharger. They're all here. Every single part you can think of. I'm going to do this right for the most part. And some little extras that I have yet to arrive. I got a new, what do you call it? A new cluster display faceplate. And it's going to be exquisite. It's going to tie the knot to this whole Panzer theme. And as you can tell, my new readouts here. I don't even know if I'm focusing here. My new readouts, that nice yellow for my new dash. And it's going to complement my dash cover. My new template. I'll share that when I receive it. I haven't received it yet. A little backtracked in the mail, which is fine. I got bigger fish to fry here, and this is pretty much what I'm going to be doing. I just wanted to share this with you guys. This is Panzer. You guys take it easy.